Welcome to the second episode of Founders Firewall. So if you've watched our previous episode, you've seen we've bought tundramoose.com, secured it, made sure transfer protection was enabled, two-factor, the recovery email for it is secure as well. Now what we're going to need is an actual business email and collaboration tools. So we're going to use Google Workspace. One of the reasons I prefer using Google Workspace, especially for not only this video, but for Founders Firewall, is a lot of tech companies use Google Workspace and Slack as their main stack for collaboration as opposed to Microsoft Office 365. However, everything we're going to do is doable with 365, more or less. Actually, 365 has more features for mobile device management and so on, but we're not going to need that. So we are going to use the Plus version of Google Workspace for Business because it's got enhanced security and management control around mobile device management. That being said, there's a very important feature that will make us need Enterprise. However, right now we don't need it. It's context-aware access. If you scroll down the comparison list, there is a bunch of different features related to security. And there we go. Context-aware access is only available in the enterprise tiers. The good news is it's available in the lowest enterprise tier. That being said, we need to contact sales. We're not going to contact sales right now. We're just going to go straight with Business Plus. And context-aware access will be very useful to require the use of a company laptop. But we don't have any company laptops right now anyway. So in this video, we're going to buy Google Workspace. We are going to set up Gmail, configure the phishing protection, spam protection, as well as authentication and data access in Google Workspace. So you're starting from a clean baseline. So I hit start a trial on the edition that I want. And so our company is called Tundra Moose. Right now it's just me. Keep in mind, adding more licenses is very easy, especially with these no annual contract type deals. So you don't need to overshoot. Like, I think I'm going to have 10 people in 6 months or whatever. So here you need to provide the current email address. Make sure you use one that is at least as secured as in the previous video when we did that for Hover, because it'll be way into your Google Workspace environment right now. And see, it's asking me if I want to set up Google Workspace for foundersfirewall.io. I'm not clicking that because I actually want to set it up with my Tundra Moose domain. So I'm going to say I'm going to set it up using an existing domain. You might be wondering why we don't just get a custom domain right here. The reason is I don't like having domains in multiple different places. And if you end up using AWS for your production stack, for example, it's just nicer to have all of your domains over there and not have things in Google. So I'm going to enter the domain name, proceed. Okay, so now we need to create a username and password for the user that's going to be there. So I'm just going to go with my first name and you need to give it a password. Keep in mind, as you do this, we will configure passkey support, secure two-factor and all of that. So the security of your passwords here doesn't really matter that much. All right. And I don't want feature announcements or tips. I'm going to create the account. Okay, you'll see it's making you verify your phone number. We know SMS-based two-factor and all that is not great, but this is just for the first time. Agree to those terms. All right, so now we are going to start the trial for Business Plus. The prices might vary. I'm in Canadian dollars over here. Okay, so now we need to enter some information about the company. I'm just going to do that, as well as enter a credit card number. And so right now, I assume you don't have a company credit card, so you're going to put your personal one in there. You'll be able to switch later. And it's actually good practice to maybe keep your personal one as a backup just in case something happens with your business card, so you can still be billed for this, because this is definitely not something you'd want to lose access to because of a payment issue. Okay, I'm submitting my payment information. So now we can add more users, but we're going to skip that for now. We already have one. So we're going to get started. It is going to give us instructions on what to do with hover.com, but essentially we just need to create a TXT record with the value of this. So I'm going to go on Hover over here, add a record, TXT. Here's the content and the host name, which is going to put @ for the root domain. I'm going to say I've done it. Okay, so now it's going to verify my DNS settings. Sometimes it could be longer than that, but it worked real quick this time. So now we're going to enable Gmail. This is going to be the most basic activation. We'll need to set up a MX record for smtp.google.com. So we can receive email, priority 1, smtp.google.com, and hostname at right here. All right, I've done that. Confirm. So now in theory, we can receive email in Gmail. That being said, we did not set up SPF, email authentication, or anything like that. So if you were to send email out, email deliverability is probably going to be pretty bad right now, especially at the beginning. So we're going to have to fix that. So now we're ready to go to the admin console. I actually don't need to add more users. Later down the road, we're going to split your Google admin account and your regular Google account, so you're not browsing all day while logged in as a Google admin. So now we're going to admin.google.com. All right, we've got our admin portal. But the first thing we want to do is, before we change anything here, is enable two-factor authentication for our new account. So I'm going to click my profile right here, manage my Google account, and under security and sign-in, what I'm going to do is create a passkey. I'm going to put it in my personal iCloud. This means that in the future, this passkey would be replicated to personal devices, even once we have company ones. But that's fine for now. What we're worried about is credential phishing. I'm also going to use a security key right here. Let me just find it. I always lose my my YubiKey, so I've got this holder with an AirTag on it. As you can see, I've added a security key and a passkey. Now it's telling me that two-step verification is not enabled, and so I can't use the key. That's because I've not enabled two-factor. So we've got a passkey, which will let me log in directly, but the security key is a second factor, so I need to enable two-step verification. All right, I've enabled two-step verification for my account. So now I'm going to go back to my admin console, and the first thing I'll do is I'll expand this menu right here, and I'm going to go to show more so I can see the security settings. So the first thing we're going to do is let's go to authentication, and let's go and check passwordless. Make sure that's enabled. It should not be by default. So we're going to enable this. So that's going to let people sign in with just a passkey. I already had a password on my account, which we set up while I was buying it. But with this, I'll be able to sign in with just my passkey. So I'm going to save this. Now I'm going to go back to two-step verification to enforce two-step verification. So if people are not using passkeys, they're using a security key, for example, that's going to work. I highly recommend not setting a new user enrollment period, or if you do, make it 1 day, not more than that. People log in and they forget about it, and then a week later they get locked out because they didn't set up two-factor verification. So with Google, it's a bit confusing between the passkeys and the two-factor. I recommend that you enforce two-step verification for only security keys. And this grace period here is if you generate a verification code for someone, how long they can use it. I think 1 day here is good. You want the shortest one. And the important one at the bottom is security code. So these are codes you can generate if you're trying to log in on something that doesn't support security keys. I think it's really important that you either don't allow them or allow them from the same network. Otherwise, you've just made your two-factor phishable in the sense that if I can generate the code from one IP address and paste it in an untrustworthy website, someone else is going to be able to use it. That second option would require that use to be done from the same IP address I'm on, which is more secure, but it's not perfect. But since you're starting from scratch, you don't have legacy apps or anything like that. So let's just disable them completely. So I'm going to save it like this. You don't have any users who don't have two-step verification, right? You only have one user, and we've just enabled that. So you're good. So two-step is configured. Now, advanced protection program, you can't enforce that, but you should enable it. That will allow people to enroll. But I would disable the ability to generate security codes for now because you don't need them. If eventually you need them, you definitely don't want to enable that third option with remote access, like the same thing as on the two-step verification policy. Login challenges, that's more if you're using a different single sign-on for logging into Google, so we don't care about that. Passwordless, we've already enabled. Password management is an interesting one. You can enforce strong passwords. At this point, the passwords don't really matter anymore because you only will support security keys and passkeys. And so the security is not in the password itself. What I like to do is to disable enforce strong passwords and just make longer minimum length. We know longer passwords are safer, and password strength is more about complexity, which Microsoft would call it, and that's a little bit annoying. So we're just going to set that to 16. Everyone in your company should have a password manager anyway, plus they're going to be logging in with passkeys, so it doesn't really matter. And this checkbox right here, if you're watching this and you already have a Google environment and you're not setting it up from scratch, this is what would apply the changes to people's existing accounts. And since password expiration should be never, if you don't check this, your new policy would never apply to anyone. If you already had 1,000 users, you would need to check this. In our case, we don't have any users. We don't care. We're going to save it like this. Now we're going to go to access and data controls, specifically API controls. So one of the issues you'll see with Google Workspace is if you don't do this, in 6 months, a year, 2 years, you're going to have a million different apps that have access to Google Workspace data, Google Drive, Gmail, and so on, and you'll have no control over what's going on. That could include a dozen apps recording meetings, apps looking at Google Drive data, Gmail, free apps that you have no contract with. So I highly recommend that you go into the API controls, go into the settings, and then only allow users to log in with their Google account if it will only read their name and email address. You want people to be logging in via their Google account if they can, right? Because all the security we just applied to their account will apply. But what you don't want is people to be able to install apps that will request access to Google data. So I usually go for that middle one right here. I think if you block everything, that's pushing people towards creating so many different accounts, maybe reusing passwords and all of that. So that middle ground there is the best. So we're going to select that. And doing this at the beginning is so easy. You definitely want that. And by default, it allows people to request access. So the admins will receive an email when someone has requested, for example, I want Calendly, so I can make a calendar booking link. And then you could decide, well, the Google Workspace tier we have already has that. So no, you're not going to connect Calendly to your Google Calendar. Or, oh, Calendly has more features and that's a legit app that we pay for. We're going to allow it. And you can set a custom message right here. You can say, ask in the security Slack channel if you need an app. You save it like that. Okay, so third-party data access is configured. This is a big one. You really want to do this at the beginning. Data classification, DLP, and all of that doesn't really matter for now. Google session controls, you'll see that depending on your risk profile, I think you want to make them shorter than 14 days. When I work in critical environments, so for example, if your startup is going to be a fintech or a crypto company or a security company or something like that, what I like to pick is 20 hours. Why not 24? Well, it's because 24 is really annoying if, let's say, you start working at 9 a.m. and then tomorrow you start working at 8 a.m. You start working, you're logged in, and then an hour later you get kicked out. Whereas 20 hours usually is a pretty good mix of you're not going to get logged out through the day, but the next time you use your computer, you're probably going to have to log in again. And info stealers are a problem. It leaks session cookies and all of that. So we definitely don't want to leave that to 14 days. So we're going to set it to 20 hours. And then you're going to see an option at the bottom, device bound session credentials. At the moment I'm recording this, it's in beta. It's quite recent. You should enable it. That being said, currently it only works on Chrome on Windows. It doesn't even work on Android. It doesn't work on Chrome OS. But what that does is if you've got a Windows machine with a TPM, your session cookies will be bound to the hardware. So if someone steals these cookies, it's not going to work on a different computer. So enable it, and over time, it should start supporting different clients. That being said, don't assume that this is protecting all of your cookies right now. Far from it. So we're going to enable that. And then we're going to go to Google. The last thing we're going to do in this video is configure email properly. You'll see that in apps under Google Workspace, you have Gmail. There's a lot of different sub settings, which you should look at. They're all important, but we're going to start with authenticate email. What you're going to do here is you pick your domain. You should only have one. Generate a new record. Pick the length. 2048 is there by default. That's fine. Prefix selector, I always leave. Google makes it easy to use different tools to check if your DKIM is set up properly. And I'm going to hit generate. And there we go. So it's asking me to create this TXT record with this value. So I'm going to go back to my hover, add a record, TXT, this, and then I'm going to copy that. There we go. All right. So now if I click start authentication, no, it actually let me do it. So by doing this, maybe DNS hasn't replicated everywhere. It's not ideal. It's a little bit YOLO if you were already receiving email, but if it's a brand new domain, that is fine. I'm going to go back to settings for Gmail. I'm going to go in safety. So that's where you have a lot of the spam filtering features. So we definitely want to protect against encrypted attachments from untrusted senders. The default action is to keep the email and show a warning. For these, I prefer putting them in a quarantine. We only have the default quarantine right now. You don't need to start breaking that up. Protect against attachments with scripts from untrusted senders. We also want to just send that to the quarantine. Protect from anomalous attachment types in email. So this is going to look like if you receive a .pif file or something like that from the MS-DOS days. We also want to quarantine that. And if you ever have an issue, you need to allow list a specific file type, you can go ahead and do that here. And make sure you leave this checked, apply future recommended settings automatically. So if something new comes out, you'll get the security improvements. I'm going to set that up, hit save. There we go. IMAP view time protections allow you to rewrite links if someone is using an IMAP client so that a decision on if something should be blocked or not can be made at click time. So if an email made it through, it wasn't known to be malicious at that time, but when someone clicks, then it's going to get blocked. We will enable this. However, we're going to disable IMAP access completely. So in theory, this changes nothing, but just in case you ever have an exception and a user requires IMAP for some reason, you should still enable that. Okay, these default settings are pretty good. Here on this spoofing and authentication one, protect against domain spoofing based on similar domain names is really important. It'll identify if someone is trying to pretend to be Tundra Moose in our case. What we want to do is, I'm going to set everything to quarantine for now. And I will say, if you realize something is a bit too aggressive, you can change the behavior there and maybe just say, keep it in the inbox and show a warning or move the email to spam. For this one, that's actually pretty dangerous. And the same one with protect against spoofing of employee names. I want to send that to the quarantine. So that one in a small company usually works pretty well. It doesn't work great for email sent to groups though, in the sense that it's not aggressive enough. But if you're in a really big company and you're watching this and you enable this, Google doesn't let you control this very specifically. So if you've got 100,000 employees and you enable that, there's probably a lot of similar names that are just going to get sent to quarantine. So not ideal. Protect against inbound emails spoofing your domain. We also want to move that to the quarantine. Protect against unauthenticated emails. So emails that don't have SPF or DKIM, what do you want to do with them? It might be fine to quarantine, but I still receive quite a few of those that are not 100% malicious. Plus, malicious starts to use proper SPF and DKIM anyway. So in this case, I'll just move it to spam right now. And this is really important as well. Protect Google Groups from inbound emails spoofing your domain. So what we're going to do is quarantine all this and apply future recommended settings automatically. Again, if you're watching this and you already have a Google environment, you don't want to harden all of these all at once. Maybe do them once a day and check the impact. There's the audit log that will show you if mail is being moved to the quarantine and why, so you can tune this a little bit. But when you're getting started, there's no reason not to be very aggressive. So I'm going to go back to settings for Gmail. So we just did safety. We're now going to go to end user access. That's where we can block IMAP. And so by default, POP and IMAP is enabled on Google, which I think is quite dangerous. So for example, all these warnings that we just configured, you can either quarantine or show a warning. That assumes people are using the Gmail app or they're just using the web app. If you're using IMAP, you're bypassing that. There's other mobile security features we can enable to prevent data from being sent to personal storage. If people receive an attachment on IMAP, you're not going to control that. So we're just going to block IMAP completely. I don't know why anyone will use POP nowadays, but we need to turn it on because apparently Google thinks it's a good thing to have enabled by default. I'm going to do the same thing with Google Workspace Sync for Outlook. If someone wants to connect Google Mail with Outlook, just fire them. That's going to be much easier. Automatic forwarding is an interesting one. It is something that threat actors will use to keep access to your accounts if they break in, right? So if they forward all the email, eventually they can do a password reset on some service and they'll get that email. So it is good to disable that. However, you'll see as your business grows, you're going to have people who want to do automatic forwarding. For example, oh, I want all of my Uber receipts to go to our expense tracking platform. If you just disable it, it's possibly a little bit annoying, but I will say for now, disable it. If you ever allow this again, you'll want to be sure you've got alerting configured so you know when people are setting it up, and then you can see, okay, what's the destination and is this legit? So I'm disabling that. I'm not going to allow any URL patterns. That's so images are not proxied, and we don't need any specific different gateways. And interestingly enough, Google thinks that POP should be enabled by default, but emoji reactions shouldn't. I actually think that goes hand in hand in the sense that this is not really a feature that a standard mail client could support. But anyway, we're not going to use email that much. We're mostly going to be a Slack company, right? So let me go back to my settings for Gmail. And the last thing we're going to look at right now is the spam, phishing, and malware tab. You're going to say, didn't we just configure spam in the safety section? Yeah, there's just two sections with the same stuff. So what we're going to do is make sure the most advanced settings are all enabled. So pre-delivery message scanning, yes. Enhanced malware and phishing protection, yes. Again, very easy to do while you're not receiving anything. And there's some privacy notices right here. The way I see it is your email's already all at Google, so it doesn't make much difference if you enable more of these settings. Security sandbox, that's going to be virtual execution of attachments. We're blocking a lot of attachments already. One great reason to enable this beyond just blocking malware is some cyber insurance companies actually ask if you have that. And so there you go. You know, you're paying for Google, might as well turn on all the different settings. Security sandbox rules would be if you don't enable that for everything, you can specify file types you want that for. And then there's block senders and spam allow lists, which hopefully you're not going to need to use much. We've got basic Google setup, authentication is secure. Now, email is configured decently as a start. The only thing left to do is we don't have a DMARC policy, so we're going to go and do that now. We've configured DKIM, and we've put a public key in DNS. We don't have a policy yet that says if we're sending email that is not DKIM validated, reject it. So this is not as effective as it should be. So for our DMARC records, I like to just use the MX Toolbox. If you type your domain name, you'll see that there's actually no DMARC record. So it's going to show you how to create one, and you see the results over here. So the way DMARC works is usually you want to have an email to receive the logs if you start blocking, but you don't necessarily want to publish your own email in DNS for spam reasons. I'll create a group right now, and then we will use that. So we're gonna call the group, we're gonna put it in boat. And how do we want mail that fails DMARC to be treated? We're going to say reject 100%. And again, standard disclaimer, don't do this on an existing account. You'd want to start with reporting only, and you'd want to start with smaller percentages before starting to block everything. So now I need to create a DMARC record with this, which I'll do on hover right here. I don't love their formatting, so I'm going to resize my window. Okay, much better. I'm going to add this. There we go. So now I just need to go back to Google and create my DMARC reports group. So I'm going to go in my directory, groups, create a group email, call it DMARC reports for mailing, description, receiving DMARC reports. And who can manage members? I always empty this, and I always say only invited users can join this, and you definitely don't want to allow external people. to be in there. Who can contact group owners? We can remove all that. It's who can post that's important, and who can view members. We can leave all organization, create a group. And now I'm going to add myself to it. And so the way it works is every night, if I've been sending out email that's been bouncing because of DMARC, I'll receive the reports the next day, and then I can tweak my settings if necessary. So now you've got Gmail that is set up pretty sensibly. Email is authenticated. The spam filtering is quite good, except for groups. Again, Google spam filtering for groups is not awesome. And you're good to go. And now you have a business email that you can start using. In the next episode, we're going to look at Google's device management so that we can make iOS and Android devices pretty sane, no data being sent to third-party apps without doing full MDM, which is quite annoying. So stay tuned for that next episode.